over the creation of the Lord. And the portion of the effulgence which is covered by the material cloud is called the creation of the cosmos of the three material qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas. How can persons who are within this clouded portion called the material world conceive the absolute truth by the speculative method?
Thanks, Prabhu. In answering King Parikshit's question, Shukadeva Goswami replied that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created the mind, senses, and living force of the living entity for the purpose of sense gratification and transmigration from one kind of body to another, as well as for the purpose of allowing liberation from the material conditions. In other words, one can utilize the senses, mind, and living force for sense gratification and transmigration from one body to another, or for the matter of liberation. The Vedic injunctions are there just to give the conditioned souls the chance for sense gratification under regulative principles. And thereby also to give them the chance for promotion to higher conditions of life. Ultimately, if the consciousness is purified, one comes to his original position and goes back home, back to Godhead. The living entity is intelligent. One therefore has to utilize his intelligence over the mind and the senses. When the mind and senses are purified by the proper use of intelligence, then the conditioned soul is liberated. Otherwise, if the intelligence is not properly utilized in controlling the senses and mind, the conditioned soul continues to transmigrate from one kind of body to another simply for sense gratification. Another point clearly stated in the answer of Shukadeva Goswami is that it is the mind, senses, and intelligence of the individual living entity that the Lord created. It is not stated that the living entities themselves were ever created. Just as the shining particles of the sun's rays exist with the sun, the living entities exist eternally as parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But just as the sun rays are sometimes covered by a cloud, which is created by the sun, so the conditioned souls, although eternally existing as parts of the Supreme Lord, are sometimes put within the cloud of the material concept of life, in the darkness of ignorance. The whole Vedic process is to alleviate that darkened condition. Ultimately, when the senses and mind of the conditioned being are fully purified, he comes to his original position, called Krishna consciousness, and that is liberation.
In the Vedanta Sutra, the first sutra or code questions about the absolute truth, the Tato Brahma Jignasa. What is the nature of the absolute truth? The next sutra answers that the nature of the absolute truth is that he is the origin of everything. Whatever we experience, even in this material condition of life, is but an emanation from him. The absolute truth created the mind, senses, and intelligence. This means that the absolute truth is not without mind, intelligence, and senses. In other words, he is not impersonal. The very word created means that he has transcendental intelligence. For example, when a father begets a child, the child has senses because the father also has senses. The child is born with hands and legs because the father also has hands and legs. Sometimes it is said that man is made after the image of God. The absolute truth is therefore the Supreme Personality with transcendental mind, senses, and intelligence. When one's mind, intelligence, and senses are purified of material contamination, one can understand the original feature of the absolute truth as a person. The Vedic process is to promote the conditioned soul gradually from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion, and from the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, there is sufficient light for understanding things as they are. For example, from earth a tree grows, and from the wood of the tree fire is ignited. In that igniting process, we first of all find smoke, and the next stage is heat, and then fire. When there is actually fire, we can utilize it for various purposes. Therefore, fire is the ultimate goal. Similarly, in the gross material stage of life, the quality of ignorance is very prominent. Dissipation of this ignorance takes place in the gradual progress of civilization from the barbarian stage to civilized life. And when one comes to this stage of civilized life, he is said to be in the mode of passion. In the barbarian stage or in the mode of ignorance, the senses are gratified in a very crude way, whereas in the mode of passion or in civilized life, the senses are gratified in a polished manner. But when one is promoted to the mode of goodness, one can understand that the senses and the mind are engaged in material activities only due to being covered by perverted consciousness. When this perverted consciousness is gradually transformed into Krishna consciousness, then the path of liberation is opened. So it is not that one is unable to approach the absolute truth by the senses and the mind. The conclusion is rather that the senses, mind, and intelligence in the gross stage of contamination cannot appreciate the nature of the absolute truth. But when purified, the senses, mind, and intelligence can understand what the absolute truth is. The purifying process is called devotional service or Krishna consciousness.
In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to understand Krishna, and that Krishna is understood by devotional service, beginning with the process of surrender. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one has to think of Krishna always. One has to render loving service to Krishna always, and one always has to worship and bow down before Krishna. By this process only can one enter into the kingdom of God without any doubt. One who is enlightened in the mode of goodness by the process of devotional service is freed from the modes of ignorance and passion. In answering King Parikshit's question, Sukadeva Goswami used the word Atmane, which indicates the stage of Brahmanical qualification in which one is allowed to study the Vedic scriptures known as the Upanishads. The Upanishads describe in different ways the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord. The absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, is called Nirguna. It does not mean he has no qualities. It is only because he has qualities that the conditioned living entities can have qualities. The purpose of studying the Upanishads is to understand the transcendental qualities of the absolute truth, as opposed to the material qualities of ignorance, passion, and goodness. That is the way of Vedic understanding. Great sages like the four Kumaras, headed by Sanaka, followed these principles of Vedic knowledge and came gradually from impersonal understanding to the platform of personal worship of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore recommended that we must follow the great personalities. Sukadeva Goswami is also one of the great personalities, and his answer to the inquiry of Maharaja Parikshit is authorized. One who follows in the footsteps of such great personalities surely walks very easily on the path of liberation and ultimately goes back home, back to Godhead. That is the way of perfecting this human form of life.
Shukadeva Goswami continued to speak to Parikshit Maharaj. My dear king, he said, in this regard, I shall narrate a nice story. This story is important because it is in connection with Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This narration is a conversation between Narayan Rishi and the great sage Narada. Narayan Rishi still resides in Badarika Ashram and is accepted as an incarnation of Narayan. Badarika Ashram is situated in the northernmost part of the Himalayan mountains and is always covered with snow. Religious Indians still go to visit this place during the summer season, when the snowfall is not very severe. Once when Narada, the great devotee and ascetic among the demigods, was traveling among different planets, He desired to meet the ascetic Narayan personally in Badarik Ashram and offer him respects. This great sage incarnation of Godhead, Narayan Rishi, has been undergoing great penances and austerities from the very beginning of the creation to teach the inhabitants of Bharatavarsha how to attain the highest perfectional stage of going back to Godhead. His austerities and penances are exemplary practices for the human being. The incarnation of God, Narayan Rishi, was sitting among many devotees in the village known as Kalapagram. Of course, these were not ordinary sages sitting with him, and the great sage Narada also appeared there. After offering his respects to Narayan Rishi, Narada asked him exactly the same question King Parikshit asked Shukadeva Goswami. Then the Rishi answered by following in the footsteps of his predecessors. He narrated a story of how the same question had been discussed on a planet known as Janaloka, which is above the Swarvaloka planets, such as the Moon and Venus. On this planet, great sages and saintly persons live. And they once discussed the same point regarding the understanding of Brahman and his real identity.
The great sage Narayan began to speak. My dear Narada, he said, I shall tell you a story which took place long, long ago. There was a great meeting of the denizens of the heavenly planets, and almost all the important brahmacharis, such as the four Kumaras, Sanandana, Sanaka, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumar, attended. Their discussion was on the subject matter of understanding the absolute truth, Brahman. You were not present at that meeting because you had gone to see my expansion Aniruddha, who lives on the island of Shvetadvip. In this meeting, all the great sages and brahmacharis very elaborately discussed the point about which you have asked me, and their discussion was very interesting. It was so delicate that even the Vedas were unable to answer the intricate questions raised. Narayan Rishi told Naradaji that the same question Naradaji had raised had been discussed in that meeting on Janaloka. This is the way of understanding through the parampara, or disciplic succession. Maharaj Parikshit questioned Shukadev Goswami, and Shukadev Goswami referred the matter to Narada, who had in the same way questioned Narayan Rishi, who had put the matter to still higher authorities on the planet of Janaloka, where it was discussed among the great Kumaras, Sanatana, Sanaka, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumara. These four brahmacharis, the Kumaras, are recognized scholars in the Vedas and other Shastras. Their unlimited volumes of knowledge, backed by austerities and penances, are exhibited by their sublime ideal character. They are very amiable and gentle in behavior, and for them there is no distinction between friends, well-wishers, and enemies. Being transcendently situated, such personalities as the Kumaras are above all material considerations and are always neutral in respect to material dualities. Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai. In the discussions held among the four brothers, one of them, namely Sanandana, was selected to speak, and the other brothers became the audience to hear him.
Sanandana said, after the dissolution of the whole cosmic manifestation, the entire energy in the whole creation in its nucleus form enter into the body of Garbhodakshaya, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. The Lord at that time remains asleep for a long, long time, and when there is again necessity of creation, the Vedas, personified, assembled around the Lord and begin to glorify him, describing his wonderful transcendental pastimes, exactly like servants of a king. When the king is asleep in the morning, the appointed reciters come around his bedroom and begin to sing of his chivalrous actions. And while hearing of his glorious activities, the king gradually awakens. The Vedic reciters, or personified Vedas, sing thus, O unconquerable Lord, you are the supreme personality. No one is equal to you or greater than you. No one can be more glorious in his activities. All glories unto you. All glories unto you. By your own transcendental nature, you fully possess all six opulences. As such, you are able to deliver all conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. O Lord, we fervently pray that you do. We fervently pray that you kindly do so. All the living entities, being your parts and parcels, are naturally joyful, eternal, and full of knowledge. But due to their own faults, they imitate you by trying to become the supreme enjoyer. Thus, they disobey your supremacy and become offenders. And because of their offenses, your material energy has taken charge of them. Thus, their transcendental qualities of joyfulness, bliss, and wisdom have been covered by the clouds of the three material qualities. This cosmic manifestation, made of the three material qualities, is just like a prison house for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are struggling very hard to escape from material bondage, and according to their different conditions of life, they have been given different types of engagement. But since all engagements are based on knowledge supplied by you, the conditioned souls can execute pious activities only when you mercifully inspire them to do so. Therefore, without taking shelter at your lotus feet, one cannot surpass the influence of material energy. Actually, we, as personified Vedic knowledge, are always engaged in your service by helping the conditioned souls understand you.
This states that the Vedas are meant for helping the conditioned souls to understand Krishna. All the Shrutis, or personified Vedas, offered glories to the Lord again and again, singing, Jaya, Jaya. Excuse me. This indicates that the Lord is the most glorious. Of all his glories, the most important is his causeless mercy upon the conditioned souls in reclaiming them from the clutches of Maya. There are unlimited numbers of living entities in different varieties of bodies, some moving and some standing in one place. And the conditioned life of these living entities is due only to their forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity wants to lord it over the material energy by imitating the position of Krishna, he is immediately captured by the material energy and, according to his desire, is offered one variety of the 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies. Although undergoing the threefold miseries of material existence, the illusion living entity falsely thinks himself the master of all he surveys. Under the spell of the material energy, represented by the threefold material qualities, the living entity is not at all able to become free unless he is graced by the Supreme Lord. The living entity cannot conquer the influence of the material modes of nature by his own endeavor, but because material nature is working under the control of the Supreme Lord, the Lord is beyond its jurisdiction. Except for him, all living entities, from Brahma down to the ant, are conquered by the contact of material nature.
Because the Lord possesses in full the six opulences of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, he alone is beyond the spell of material nature. Unless the living entity is situated in Krishna consciousness, he cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet the Lord, by his omnipotency, can dictate from within as the supersoul how a living entity can gradually come to him even while performing his ordinary work. As the Lord advises in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you do, do it for me. Whatever you eat, first offer it to me. Whatever charity you want to give, first give it to me. And whatever austerities and penances you want to perform them for me. In this way, the karmis are directed gradually to develop Krishna consciousness. Similarly, Krishna directs the philosophers to approach him gradually by discriminating between Brahman and Maya. For at last, when one is mature in knowledge, he surrenders unto Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, After many, many births, the wise philosopher surrenders unto me. The yogis are also directed to concentrate their meditation upon Krishna within the heart, and by such a continuous process of Krishna consciousness, they can also become free from the clutches of the material energy. The devotees, however, are engaged in devotional service with love and affection from the very beginning, and therefore the Lord personally directs them so that they can approach him without difficulty or deviation. This is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Only by the grace of the Lord can the living entity understand the exact position of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The statements of the personified Vedas give clear evidence that the Vedic literature is presented only for understanding Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that through all the Vedas, it is Krishna alone who has to be understood. Krishna is always enjoying, either in the material world or in the spiritual world, because he is the supreme enjoyer. For him, there is no distinction between the material and spiritual worlds. The material world is an impediment for the ordinary living entities because they are under its control. But Krishna, being the controller of the material world, has nothing to do with the impediments it offers. Therefore, in different parts of the Upanishads, the Vedas declare the Supreme Brahman is eternal, full of all knowledge and all bliss. That one Supreme Personality of Godhead exists in the heart of every living entity. Because of his all pervasiveness, he is able to enter not only into the hearts of the living entities, but even into the atoms also. As the Supersoul, he is the controller of all activities of the living entities. He lives within all of them and witnesses their actions, allowing them to act according to their desires, and also giving them the results of their different activities. He is the living force of all things, but he is transcendental to the material qualities. He is omnipotent. He is expert in manufacturing everything, and on account of his superior natural knowledge, he can bring everyone under his control. As such, he is everyone's master. He is sometimes manifest on the surface of the globe, but he is simultaneously within all matter. Desiring to expand himself in multi-forms, he glanced over the material energy, and thus innumerable living entities became manifest. Everything is created by his superior energy, and everything in his creation appears to be perfectly done without deficiency. Those who aspire for liberation from this material world must therefore worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate cause of all causes. He is just like the total mass of earth, from which varieties of earthly pots are manufactured. The pots are made of earthly clay. They rest on earth, and after being destroyed, their elements ultimately merge back into earth, the original cause of all varieties of manifestation.
Employing this analogy of Brahman with earth, the impersonalists especially stress the Vedic statement, Sarvam Khamidam Brahma, everything is Brahman. The impersonalists do not take into account the varieties of manifestation emanating from the supreme cause, Brahman. They simply consider that everything emanates from Brahman and after destruction merges into Brahman, and that the intermediate stage of manifestation is also Brahman. But although the Mayavadis believe that prior to its manifestation, the cosmos was in Brahman, after creation, it remains in Brahman, and after destruction, it merges into Brahman, they do not know what Brahman is. The Brahma Samhita, however, clearly describes Brahman. The living entities, space, time, and the material elements like fire, earth, sky, water, and mind constitute the total cosmic manifestation known as Bhuvaha, and Svaha, which is manifested by Govinda. It flourishes on the strength of Govinda, and after annihilation enters into and is conserved in Govinda. Lord Brahma therefore says, I worship Lord Govinda, the original personality, the cause of all causes. The word Brahman indicates the greatest of all and the maintainer of everything. The impersonalists are attracted by the greatness of the sky, but because of their poor fund of knowledge, they are not attracted by the greatness of Krishna. In our practical life, however, we are attracted by the greatness of a person and not the greatness of a big mountain. Thus, the term Brahman actually applies to Krishna only. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna concluded that Lord Krishna is the Parabrahman, or the supreme resting place of everything.
Krishna is the supreme Brahman because of his unlimited knowledge, unlimited potencies, unlimited strength, unlimited influence, unlimited beauty, and unlimited renunciation. Ultimately, therefore, the word Brahman can be applied to Krishna only. Arjuna affirms that because the impersonal Brahman is the effulgence emanating as rays of Krishna's transcendental body, Krishna is the Parabrahman. Everything rests on Brahman, but Brahman itself rests on Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is the ultimate Brahman, or Parabrahman. The material elements are accepted as the inferior energy of Krishna. By their interactions, the cosmic manifestation takes place, rests on Krishna, and after dissolution again enters into the body of Krishna as his subtle energy. Krishna is therefore the cause of both manifestation and dissolution. Sarvam Kalavidam Brahma means that everything is Lord Krishna in the sense that everything is his energy. That is the vision of the Mahabhagavatas. They see everything in relation to Krishna. The impersonalists argue that Krishna himself has been transformed into many, and that therefore everything is Krishna and worship of anything is worship of him. This false argument is answered by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Although everything is a transformation of the energy of Krishna, he is not present everywhere. He is simultaneously present and not present. By his energy, he is present everywhere. But as the energetic, he is not present everywhere. This simultaneous presence and non-presence is indeed consensus. But a clear explanation is given in the beginning of the Ishopanishad. Although unlimited energies and their transformations emanate from Krishna, Krishna's personality is not in the least bit transformed. Therefore, since Krishna is the cause of all causes, intelligent persons should take shelter of his lotus feet.
Krishna advises everyone just to surrender unto him alone, and that is the way of Vedic instruction. Since Krishna is the cause of all causes, he is worshipped by all kinds of sages and saints through observance of the regulative principles. As far as meditation is concerned, great personalities meditate on the transcendental form of Krishna within the heart. In this way, the minds of great personalities are always engaged in Krishna. With their minds engaged in Krishna, naturally the captivated devotees simply talk of Krishna. Talking of Krishna or singing of Krishna is called kirtan. Lord Chaitanya recommends kirtaniya sada harihi, which means always thinking and talking of Krishna and nothing else. That is called Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is so sublime that anyone who takes to this process is elevated to the highest perfection of life, far, far beyond the concept of liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Krishna advises everyone always to think of him, render devotional service to him, worship him, and offer obeisances to him. In this way, a devotee becomes fully Krishnized, and being always situated in Krishna consciousness ultimately goes back to Krishna.
Although the Vedas have recommended worship of different demigods as different parts and parcels of Krishna, it is to be understood that such instructions are meant for less intelligent men who are still attracted by material sense enjoyment. But the person who actually wants perfect fulfillment of the mission of human life should simply worship Lord Krishna, and that will simplify the matter and completely guarantee the success of his human life. Although the sky, the water, and the land are all part of the material world, when one stands on the solid land his position is more secure than when he stands in the sky or the water. An intelligent person, therefore, does not stand under the protection of different demigods, although they are part and parcel of Krishna. Rather, he stands on the solid ground of Krishna consciousness that makes his position sound and secure. Impersonalists sometimes give the example that if one stands on a stone or piece of wood, one certainly stands on the surface of the land, because the stone and the wood both rest on the surface of the earth. But it may be replied that if one stands directly on the surface of the earth, he is more secure than if he stands on a piece of wood or a stone that rests on the earth. In other words, taking shelter in the Paraatma, or taking shelter of impersonal Brahman, is not as secure as a course as taking direct shelter of Krishna and Krishna consciousness. The position of yanis and yogis is therefore not as secure as the position of the devotees of Krishna. Lord Krishna has therefore advised in the Bhagavad Gita that only a person who has lost his sense takes to the worship of demigods. And regarding persons attached to the impersonal Brahman, Srimad Bhagavatam says, "My dear Lord, those who think of themselves as liberated by mental speculation are not yet purified of the contamination of the material nature because of their inability to find the shelter of your lotus feet. Although they rise to the transcendental situation of existence in a personal Brahman, they certainly fall from the exalted position because they deride your lotus feet. Lord Krishna therefore advises that the worshippers of the demigods are not very intelligent persons because they derive only temporary, exhaustible results. Their endeavors are those of less intelligent men. On the other hand, the Lord assures that his devotee has no fear falling."
The personified Vedas continue to pray, "Dear Lord, considering all points of view, if a person has to worship someone superior to himself, then just out of good behavior, he should stick to the worship of your lotus feet because you are the ultimate controller of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. You are the controller of the three worlds, Pu, Puva, and Swaha. You are the controller of the 14 upper and lower worlds, and you are the controller of the three material qualities. Demigods and persons advanced in spiritual knowledge always hear and chant about your transcendental pastimes because this process has the specific potency of nullifying the accumulated results of sinful life. Intelligent persons factually dip in the ocean of your nectarian activities and very patiently hear about them. Thus, they are immediately freed from the contamination of the material qualities. They do not have to undergo severe penances and austerities for advancement in spiritual life. This chanting and hearing of your transcendental pastimes is the easiest process for self-realization. Simply by submissive oral reception of the transcendental message, one's heart is cleansed of all dirty things. Thus, Krishna consciousness becomes fixed in the heart of a devotee. The great authority Bhishma Dev has also given the opinion that this process of chanting and hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the highest religious process. And the Taittiriya Upanishad says that worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the essence of all Vedic ritualistic performances.
Dear Lord, the personified Vedas continued. The devotee who wants to elevate himself simply by the process of devotional activities, especially by hearing and chanting, very soon comes out of the clutches of the dualities of material existence. By this simple process of penance and austerity, the super soul within the devotee's heart is very much pleased and gives the devotee directions so that he may go back home, back to Godhead. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that one who engages all his activities and senses in the devotional service of the Lord becomes completely peaceful because the supersoul is satisfied with him. Thus, the devotee becomes transcendental to all dualities, such as heat and cold, honor and dishonor. Being freed from all dualities, he feels transcendental bliss, and he no longer suffers cares and anxieties due to material existence. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that the devotee, always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, has no anxieties for his maintenance or protection. Being constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness, he ultimately achieves the highest perfection. While in material existence, he lives very peacefully and blissfully, without cares and anxieties, and after quitting this body, he goes back home, back to Godhead. The Lord confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, my supreme abode is a transcendental place from which, having gone, one never returns to this material world. Anyone who attains the supreme perfection, being engaged in my personal devotional service in the eternal abode, reaches the highest perfection of human life and does not have to come back to the miserable material world. The personified Vedas continued. Dear Lord, it is imperative that the living entities be engaged in Krishna consciousness, always rendering devotional service by such prescribed methods as hearing and chanting and executing your orders. If a person is not engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, it is useless for him to exhibit the symptoms of life. Generally, if a person is breathing, he is accepted to be alive. But a person without Krishna consciousness may be compared to a bellows in a blacksmith's shop. The big bellows is a bag of skin which exhales and inhales air, and a human being who simply lives within the bag of skin and bones without taking to Krishna consciousness and loving devotional service is no better than the bellows. Similarly, a non-devotee's long duration of life is compared to the long existence of a tree. His voracious eating capacity is compared to the eating of dogs and hogs, and his enjoyment in sex life is compared to that of hogs and goats.
The cosmic manifestation has been made possible because of the entrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Mahavishnu within this material world. The total material energy is agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu, and only then does the interaction of the three material qualities begin. Therefore, it should be concluded that whatever material facilities we are trying to enjoy are available only due to the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Within the body, there are 5 departments of existence known as Anamaya, Anamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and at last Anandamaya. In the beginning of life, every living entity is food conscious. A child or an animal is satisfied only by getting nice food. This stage of consciousness, in which the goal is to eat sumptuously, is called Anamaya. Ana means food. After this, one lives in the consciousness of being alive. If one can continue his life without being attacked or destroyed, one thinks himself happy. This stage is called Pranamaya, or consciousness of one's existence. After this stage, when one is situated on the mental platform, his consciousness is called Manomaya. The materialistic civilization is primarily situated in these 3 stages: Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya. The first concern of civilized persons is economic development. The next concern is defense against being annihilated. And the next consciousness is mental speculation, the philosophical approach to the values of life.
If by the evolutionary process of philosophical life, one happens to reach the platform of intellectual life and understands that he is not this material body, but a spiritual soul, he is situated in the Vijnanamaya stage. Then, by evolution in spiritual life, he comes to the understanding of the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Soul. When one develops his relationship with him, and executes devotional service, that stage of life is called Krishna consciousness, the Anandamaya stage. Anandamaya is the blissful life of knowledge and eternity. As it is said in the Vedanta Sutra, Anandamaya Vaishya, the Supreme Brahman and the subordinate Brahman, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, are both joyful by nature. As long as the living entities are situated in the lower four stages of life, Anamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, they are considered to be in the material condition of life. But as soon as one reaches the Anandamaya, he is a liberated soul. This Anandamaya stage is explained in the Bhagavad Gita as the Brahma Bhuta stage. There it is said, in the Brahma Bhuta stage of life, there is no anxiety and no hankering. This stage begins when one is equally disposed toward all living entities, and then it expands to the stage of Krishna consciousness, in which one always hankers to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This hankering for advancement in devotional service is not the same as hankering for sense gratification in material existence. In other words, hankering remains in spiritual life, but it becomes purified. Similarly, when our senses are purified, they are freed from all material stages, namely Anamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, and they become situated in the highest stage, Anandamaya, or blissful life in Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers consider Anandamaya to be the state of being merged in the Supreme. To them, Anandamaya means the super soul, and the individual soul can become one. But the real fact is that oneness does not mean merging into the Supreme and losing one's own individual existence. Merging into the spiritual existence is the living entity's realization of qualitative oneness with the Supreme Lord in his aspects of eternity and knowledge. But the actual Ananda Maya, blissful stage, is attained when one is engaged in devotional service. That is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Mad Bhaktin Lavate Param. Here, Lord Krishna states that the Brahma Bhuta Ananda Maya stage is complete only when there is an exchange of love between the Supreme and the subordinate living entities. Unless one comes to this Ananda Maya stage, his breathing is like breathing of a bellows in a blacksmith shop. His duration of life is like that of a tree, and he is no better than the lower animals like the camels, hogs, and dogs.